Hello everybody, this is Disco Dogs, and I messed up my intro, but whatever. Today we are reading, and this is chapter 7 of Watch Out for the Lucky. The next day passed slowly after begrudgingly sleeping in his nice, soft, and oh so comfortable nest. Green took all the blankets and pillows and put them back in their right places. He strictly ignored the part of himself that was sad to watch the nest go. He felt his wings twitch every time he tore a blanket away and tossed it back into the bed. When he was done, he decided it was finally time to see what the kitchen had been stocked with. When he woke up that morning, he realized it was quite late in the day. It was now late brunch time. Though he wasn't really that hungry, it was kind of weird that he even had a kitchen considering there was a whole cafeteria. Then again, plenty of people worked in this building and didn't live here, and really Green knew he wasn't the best cook, so he probably was going to frequent the cafeteria more often than not. Ignoring the twitching of his ear feathers, he opened cabinet after cabinet, taking stock of everything. It was getting quite annoying that these avian instincts were acting up again. He used to have these under such good control. Why were they irritated? He supposed maybe it had to do with the new environment. Yep, that sounded right. He got used to the area yet, and once his birdiness caught up, he would be back to being normal. While glancing around the kitchen, Green noticed that all the food was avian safe, even down to the cereal. They really thought of everything, huh? Shrugging his shoulders, Green grabbed one of the boxes of some random cereal and a bowl. It had been a while since he had this kind of meal. Typically, he didn't have enough money for milk, and while he wasn't quite sure if this whole hero business would extend past getting his family back, he was going to milk this for what it's worth. He took his dubiously expensive bowl of cereal to the couch and looked up yet another luxury he could not have afforded. A TV. Squinting his eyes at it, he brought a spoonful up to his mouth. He was never really one to watch TV in any of the foster houses he was in, and he certainly didn't have one back at his old place to pursue. While he knew that to get enjoyment out of it, he had to turn it on. He wouldn't even know what to watch. Maybe he put his half-empty bowl of cereal on the coffee table in front of him. Maybe next time he sees Scar, he could ask him for some recommendations. Would that be weird? No, probably not. Maybe. Whatever. Taking his bowl to the sink to wash it out, Green started to plan out the rest of his day. He waited for the night. He couldn't really sneak around the facility looking for classified documents if it was plain daylight. He'd get caught way too easily, which would ruin everything. So nighttime, he must wait. Placing the bowl on a drying rack next to the sink, distantly he remembered he had a dishwasher, but he was too used to washing dishes by hand at this point. He looked around his apartment. It was so quiet, a serene kind of calm from that most would find easy to breathe in. The sun peeking through the curtains, the lighting in the room in a natural glow. He wasn't sure how thick the walls were, but he hadn't heard a peep from anyone else in the building. It's peaceful, and it's calm, and it's boring. With a sigh, Green set out to find something, anything to do. He put most of the clothes away last night. It was also entirely possible he purposely kept some of the ones he didn't particularly like in the boxes that he shoved into the back of one of the closets. But Cub didn't need to know that. With that thought, Green remembered that putting some of the clothes into the closets, he noticed some stuff that looked to be left behind by the last resident or the people in charge of this room. Just didn't feel the need to take it away. Hopefully they left something entertaining. Walking back into his room, Green got on his knees and crawled into the closet. Locating the stack of stuff in the back, he pulled out a few of the random items out into the light. Most of it seemed to be small things that someone no longer wanted. A cheap-looking wine glasses, an old baseball cap or two, a couple plushies that looked impersonal. Pushing those to the side, Green saw something bigger in the very back that looked promising. Reaching further back, he pulled the heavy item closer along with something that was piled on top. or some things. Looking at what he just pulled into the light, it looked like someone had thrown an old record player back there, along with several records to go along with it. Upon realizing what he stumbled on, a wide smile stretched across his face. Music. It had been so long since he had something just to play music on. He once had a portable CD player that an old foster home had given him, but he had lost it a long, long time ago. He hauled the heavy record player into the main room, placing it on the coffee table with a huff. He ran his hand through the faded wood top, lifting it to look at the inside. Everything seemed to be intact, if not a little dusty, and well used in the past. Bouncing on his toes, he grabbed the plug and searched for an outlet. After plugging it in, he excitedly looked through the vinyl records. All of them were covered in a layer of dust, and a few of them were in covers that were held up together with tape and a prayer. They also seemed well loved. He wonders why someone would have shoved them in the back of an unused closet. Nonetheless, he gets used to them now. He used them, and use them he will. Finders keepers and all that. He pulls the most rough-looking record from the bunch, deciding whoever had these last loved this one the most. It must be pretty good. He didn't recognize the name of it, but it had a pretty cover, or what was left of the cover. Gently placing it on the player, he ticked over the needle and pressed on the button, hoping for the best. And it seemed his hopes were met when the record hummed to life, skipping slightly before the song started playing. It was a piano-heavy solo melody that immediately made him feel relaxed. It was light-sounding and beautifully flowing. He leaned back on the couch, happily listening to the song continue into the otherwise silent room. Somehow, it felt like a coming home, a warm hug. Like he had heard this melody every day since birth, yet he was sure that this had been the first time he ever hearing it. He let his eyes close, enjoying the music. It ended sooner than he would have liked, frowning as he lifted his head from the back of the couch. He pulled the record out, flipping it to the next side and letting that play as well. Looking at the pile of records next to the player, he knew he was going to be doing the rest of his time today. Time seemed to pass quickly after that. Morning turned into afternoon, which turned into evening, which he spent sorting the stack of records into separate piles based on how much he liked them. Pursing his lips, he looked at the dubiously stable tower of the ones he liked versus the maybe 2 or 3 he thought were just okay. It was the last few notes floated through the air. Green let out a labored sigh. He sat forward with his hands resting on his lap, playing with his fingers. He turned his head to look out onto the balcony and into the city. It was night out, but that didn't make it dark outside. The lights from various buildings and cars cast an orange glow around the city and onto the clouds in the sky. He was sure that if he opened the door, he could also hear the sleepless metropolis. But while the city never sleeps, he knew that his heroes definitely did. There was the perfect time to do a little bit of snooping under the guise of being lost if caught. The longer he waited, the less plausible deniability if he was seen in a place he shouldn't be. Perks of being a newbie. If only he could convince himself to get up. It wasn't that he was nervous. Well, maybe he was a little nervous, but not about getting caught. Being a vigilante, he had done plenty of missions incognito. Get in, get out type business where getting caught would have had severe consequences. Very rarely had he come close to having to face any of those consequences, though. So, no, he wasn't worried about getting caught. But he was a little worried about what he would find. What if he found his family was somewhere far away? What if they were villains now? What if they are gone? Green is very aware that ignorance isn't always bliss. He would certainly feel worse never having tried to find them at all. He brings one of his wings around himself into his lap, brushing over the feather with a less than gentle hand. He'll be fine. In and out. Find some information, stay a few more days, then book it. Maybe take some of the food and clothes. But otherwise, there would be no reason to stay here if he finds his family. Resolve set, Green stood, replacing the record back into its sleeve before closing the case entirely. Maybe when he got back, he would listen to some of them again. Okay, he knew he would be listening to them again when he got back, which is why he didn't put any of the records away completely. He walked out into his room, searching for all black clothes. Cub hadn't given him much of that option. Some were mostly black, but they still had some sort of color, usually in the form of that damn heart shape. Whatever. Mostly black will work just as long as he isn't in broad daylight. After changing, Green went and opened his box labeled taxes. Most everything from the box was already put away, such as Moon and a few pictures he couldn't find himself to throw away. But at the very bottom was his small collection of weapons he used to carry when he was on the streets. Much like his bow, he wasn't quite sure where they came from, but he was sure never to lose them. He was pretty sure he wouldn't ever need to carry such protection here, but trespassing, made him feel a little paranoid. Taking one of the smaller daggers, he placed it into his boot before standing up and making his way out the door into the hallway. Closing his door quietly behind himself, he listens closely for movement anywhere. He knew that only Scar and himself live on this level, but he didn't like being questioned about the boisterous hero either. Luckily, he was alone. The lights of the hallway had been dimmed for the night, assumingly for better sleeping and possibly to dissuade people from roaming the halls at night. But that didn't stop Green. Stepping lightly into the elevator, he pressed the lowest level button available. When he originally was given a tour, he remembered a few doors in the training room hallway. Scar had explained that most were boring office rooms and such. At the time, Green didn't care much about them. But if he's not mistaken, a few of those doors had fingerprint scanners, of which he should have access to. Hopefully one of them would lead down into an archive room of sorts. He used the scanner on the elevator he was on, and sure enough, his prints were now in the system. The doors closed and he began his descent into the lowest level. It felt much longer without someone there to keep him company. He was also certainly feeling how closed off the space felt. Damn AV in this. Launching himself out of the elevator as soon as there was enough of a gap that he could, Green shuffled to a promising-looking door in the hallway. It was the last one on the left side, and he chose it first because it was few more feet away from the other door in its row. It felt oddly sectioned off, making it suspicious in his eyes. Placing his thumb on the scanner, he waited for the agreeable green pass like the elevator gave him. Unfortunately, it beeped a garish noise accompanied by a robotic female voices declaring, "Denied access." Frowning, Green smashes his thumb back into the scanner harshly. Again, the same voice appears relaying the same as before. He scoffed before changing his finger to his pointer finger, banging his other fist above the scanner. This resulted in the same situation as before. Come on, why won't it just work? Does he need to steal a pass from someone? He wasn't prepared for that much work. Who was he gonna have to steal from? Trying to break into restricted rooms, I see. Jumping back with an embarrassingly loud yelp, Green reaches his hand for his boot before his brain catches up to his ears. With wide-eyed Green sees, leaning against the elevator door, laughing his ass off, is Scar dressed in a workout clothes. He reaches his hand up under his glasses, wiping a tear away as he clutches his stomach. Green feels his cheeks warm, crossing his arms across his chest, turning his head to the side, looking at the floor. Oh, where did you come from? I didn't even hear the elevator move. He scowls, willing his heart rate to calm down. Continuing to giggle off and on, Scar takes a deep breath before finally addressing Green. It's part of my charm. I'm always there. He sent a blindingly wide smile Green's way, while joining him next to the locked door. He presses his thumb to the same scanner as Green did without a word, watching it turn green with a pleasant tune. Looking at Scar with a questioning gaze, he watches as Scar opens the door and holding it open for Green. Squinting his eyes in suspicion, Green wonders why Scar is just letting him into restricted places, especially just catching him trying to force his way in. Scar turns his head, catching Green's look, then just shrugs when he sees the question in his eyes. No tour is complete without going to the places you aren't allowed to go. Besides, I've got nothing better to do, he says nonchalantly, as if Green couldn't see he was clearly on his way to the gym. Scar must have seen the obvious call-out in his face as he scoffs, throwing his head back. Okay, fine. So maybe I had stuff I was going to do, but this is much more fun and interesting, he smiles. Green lifts his head, still squinting his eyes at Scar. I don't. He turns his head away from Scar. Believe you, he says, crossing his arms. Scar gives a sudden bark of laughter at Green's antics. Looking into the room, Green is greeted by the sight of yet another elevator. Both interesting and annoying. Both Green and Scar walk into the elevator, but Scar was the one to press a combination of buttons. Green just watched quietly as the doors closed and he felt them start to move downwards once again. Listen, there's nothing interesting down there. Real boring stuff. So I might as well show you instead of someone finding you down there and you getting in trouble. Green could hear the smile in his voice, so he gave up the suspicion. He dropped his arms and leaned against the wall, relaxing. Yeah, whatever. What are you even looking to see? Just places you aren't supposed to be, pesky bird? Green paused at the question, remembering what he was actually trying to do. Oh shit. Scar just invited himself into Green's super secret mission. Ugh, how is he supposed to get this information now with Scar breathing down his neck? He won't be able to grab any documents he might need. I, was just curious, I guess, he told Scar, hoping it didn't sound too much like he was lying. Unfortunately, Scar gave him a suspicious look. I don't, he parrots Green's previous words, believe you. He finishes cheekily. Green just rolls his eyes at Scar as Scar continues. But I get it. A locked door has to be opened, you know? Well, strap in because the floor you want to go to is like really, really far down. So we're going to be here for a hot minute. He brings his hands up, inspecting his nails. He painted them blue. Quite poorly, Green might add. Well, if we're going to be here for a while, tell me what's down there, Green asked while looking around the elevator. It had already been a few moments, and he was starting to get a bit antsy with the enclosed space. Well, not much. It's the lowest basement that I know of. It just has all the server rooms and Wi-Fi stuff, and the whole archived library of past missions and people involved in them. He waves his hand lazily as he speaks, as if he hadn't given Green the best news of the year. He somehow stumbled into the correct door for the stuff he needed. Green wouldn't call himself a lucky person, but maybe all the good karma was finally coming back to him in these past few weeks. He could feel his hands start to shake the further down the elevator went. Whether it was because of the new adrenaline coursing through him at being so close to finding his family, the anxiety from the small elevator, or a mixture of both, he wasn't sure. He rubs his hands together to try and relieve the energy as Scar continues. Nobody really comes down here unless something's wrong with the internet or to add to the archive. Of course, they wouldn't just want anybody down here because of all the classified mission reports, so only those who are on a need-to-know basis have access, Green snorted. So why do you have access then? I'll have you know, I'm very need-to-know. I need to know everything, Green indignantly spoke back. Yes, I'm very sure the hot guy knows everything about everything ever. I do, thank you. Green brought his hand up to his mouth as he laughed over Scar's ridiculous, self-satisfied look. Seeing Green laugh at him, Scar squinted his eyes. Or, well, Green assumes he does. He just sees his eyebrows lower beneath his sunglasses, and he gets the idea he's looking at him with suspicion. I'm starting to think you don't actually believe that I know everything ever. Green only laughs harder as Scar's face melted into an affectionate stare. Though Green could see he was trying to hold back a smile as well. The elevator chooses that time to finally stop on their desired floor. With a quiet ding, the doors slide open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. As soon as the doors open, while still trying to regain his composure, Green quickly steps out of the small enclosed, tight elevator with Scar following behind him. Pausing outside the doors, Green takes a few more deep breaths. Finally looking around, the hallway is much like every other one he's seen in this building so far. White with more white. Except the lights being dimmed, it makes the shadows more pronounced, giving the walls a gray look. Walking down the hall, he passed a few doors that have glass lining on the side of the doors, letting him peek into the room. He could see green blinking lights in two of the rooms. Though the rest of the rooms were pitch black, he could feel cold air slipping from under the door. Those are the server rooms. The association has lots of cameras and computers all over the place, and that's where all the data goes, I guess. That could be completely wrong, but that's what I got when Cub explained it to me once. Scar shrugs while continuing to walk past them. Lagging behind slightly, Green looks into the rooms once more, debating whether it would be worth it to take a closer look. Ultimately, he decided that if he would have better luck looking for tangible files first. Then if nothing comes up there, he can look deeper into the server rooms to see if anything is hidden in those. Jogging to catch up to Scar, they come up on another door, but this one has another fingerprint scanner. There was a plaque on the door engraved in a language that Green didn't recognize. It was very swirly with thin dots breaking up the letters. Scar didn't even look at it. Whether he knows the language or just ignores it, Green doesn't know. How interesting. Clearly Scar knew what was behind this door, as he didn't even hesitate to press his thumb on the pad, waiting for it to turn green before twisting the handle open. He went in first, holding the door open for Green to pass. Once in the room, he shut the door behind him. It was darker in here than in the hallway, but Green could still tell he was in an in-between room. The air felt stale, and there was another door not but 10 feet away. After shutting the door, Scar pressed the button next to the door. Brace yourself. This always feels weird. And that was Green's only warning as he felt the air get sucked out of the room, then replaced a few seconds later. It was like the air was stolen from his lungs, then quickly replaced. He felt colder and slightly violated. Coughing lightly, Green leaned against the wall as he took deep breaths. Sorry, I should have warned you better. Scar hovered over Green with his hands up, as if he was going to pat his back. What was that? Green rasped, finally catching his breath. Air filter. These documents are the only copy that exists, so it's a precaution that no bad germs or particles get into the room. I'm so used to it that I forgot how bad it could feel if you aren't expecting it. It's fine, just felt weird. Green shook out his feathers, feeling them lift, then settle in new alignment. That's one way to say it. Here through this door is the hallway to the archive. Scar shuffled past Green, pressing his thumb one more time into the sensor and opening the door once he was accepted. For how much security this place had, Green was surprised Scar was just willingly letting him look around. It would have taken him ages to break through this many scanners without Scar. Pushing through the door, Green was greeted by yet another hallway, but it looked much more run down. Like, at one point, there may have been art painting on the walls, but now the paint was chipped away or poorly painted over. There were only 3 doors, yet Scar led him directly to the one across from the airlock room. Ironic that we have to have our air stolen for safety purposes, yet this place looks like I'll get this disease by looking at it, Green said, following Scar closely. I know. They don't really care about down here as much as they used to. At least the hallway, that is. Quickly opening the door, he ushered Green through, first then followed after. Flipping the light on, Green had to blink quickly to let his eyes adjust. Finally, when he could see again, he scanned the room. From floor to ceiling, there were stacked filing cabinets in rows and rows, giving the appearance of a maze. Suddenly, Green realized that his search may not be nearly as quick as he thought. Stunned, he turned to Scar. You said this was every mission, and every person even involved with the missions? He asked. Yep. If they used a computer system to store it all, it could get hacked and stolen. At least if it's all here, they can defend it. He smiled, walking further into the room. It's sectioned by heroes, villains, and civilians, then by missing reports. So, over here. He pointed to a section along the wall next to the door they entered from. Is all the heroes' files. Like me and Tango. Don't try opening Star Voids, though. It's locked. And I haven't been able to pick that lock yet. Green laughed nervously, as if he'd get in trouble for admitting that. As if Green would care. If anything, he would help Scar. Looking at all the heroes, Green feels a little small. There had to be at least 100 different names labeled on different cabinets. Some of the labels seemed to be etched out or blacked out in black marker. Scar must have noticed where he was looking because he stood next to Hero then sighed. They don't remove a file if the hero dies or goes missing, since their information would get lost, and it might be needed later on for something or another. Judging by Scar's voice, Green could guess that a few of the blacked out names were possibly some of his friends. He chooses not to bring it up. Turning away from the heroes, Green walks down an aisle labeled in alphabetical order. You said this is the civilian area? He asked, beeline for the P cabinets. Yep, it's all in alphabetical order, but towards the back it gets a little jumbled. Looking for someone? Scar's voice followed him, much more chipper than before. He must be masking again. No, he lied, finding the correct place alphabetically. Come on, Pearl Zelqua. There has to be something, anything. But after searching through the meticulously labeled folders, right where her name should be, there was nothing, not even a placeholder. Plenty of pearls lived in the city that had been involved in some with the Association Heroes, but none with his last name. He refused to let tears flood his eyes. He wasn't done yet. He had come much too far to let go where he gave up hope. He will just have to look somewhere else. Plus, he still has three other people to search for. He shakes his head while closes the filing cabinet. Two other people. Where did the three come from? He makes his way back to Scar, who watches Green come back with a small frown. Not see anything interesting, huh? He wagers. No, Green says, clipped. He needed to find more files somewhere. Maybe a missing person? Did the heroes deal with those? If so, then they must have an open mission file somewhere. Maybe they had more clues than Green did. Before he could ask, Scar stepped away from the hero files toward Green. Here, this will cheer you up. It always does for me. He turns back to the heroes and immediately pulls out the file that says tech on it. Rifling through the files among files, Green leans over her shoulder, slightly interested in whatever Scar was going to show him. Finally, he pulls back with a soft aha. Turning back to Green, he shoves the paper into Green's hands, pulling away to place his hand on his hips in a power stance, looking proud. Pulling his hands back from his chest after barely gripping the paper from Scar, he holds it up to see what must be a very tiny tango. Green feels a smile stretch across his face as he looked at the small child with blonde hairs and ears much too big for their head, caught mid-bit of what Green can only assume is chocolate cake. They were dressed in a red jumper with pink and white hearts pattern all over. As if he looked closely, he could make out the beginning of a fire coming off his head. Finishing his assessment, he hands the photo back to Scar, giggling softly. Scar takes the photo, putting it back, laughing as well. Suddenly, Green is hit with a revelation. So what you're showing me is that heroes have baby pictures in their files? He asks Scar with a mischievous smile. Scar doesn't seem to catch on as he laughs one more before nodding. I suppose. He closes the file before finally turning to Green and seeing his smile. Suddenly, Scar's smile drops. Don't even think about it, pesky bird. He shouts as Green turns tail and books it for the Hawkeye file. Scar reaches out, but his hand catches air. Green slides to a halt, yanking open the file, quickly shuffling through its contents. Just like in tangos, in the back was an almost empty folder with a few photos inside. Pulling a random one out, Green coos at baby Scar. He was sitting on the floor of a kitchen with a mischievous grin on his face, surrounded by pots and pans with a wooden spoon in hand. The photo was abruptly snatched from his hand, but the damage had been done as Green doubled over laughing with bird-like coos interrupting him every so often. Laugh it up. Very funny, he said discontentedly, putting the photo away. Green reached up, grasping Scar's sleeve, preventing him from shutting the file. Scar gave him an odd look as he recovered from his laughing fit. Wait, I want to see more! He wiped a tear away with his free hand as he peered into Hawkeye's file once more. Scar seemed hesitant to let him look, but he didn't close the file. They seemed to be folders labeled with normal stuff such as personal documents, tax forms, and a few packed folders named missions that were close to bursting at the seams. But what Green found odd was that the 4 folders in the front with blacked out labels. When he went to reach for one, Scar grabbed his wrist. They locked eyes, and while Green couldn't really see his eyes, he let his arm drop. Looking back in, he saw a partial label connected to all of them that read, Bodum. What's a Bodum? He asked, looking back at Scar, keeping his hands by his sides, leaning from the last time. Green is taken aback when Scar's face looked shocked, aghast that Green would even ask a question like that. You've never heard of Team Bodum? He breathed, appalled. He dropped his arms from the open file to take a step away from Green, tilting his head to the side. Green got the feeling he was missing something. A feeling in his chest spread out into his limbs that froze his lungs. Bodum? He's very sure he's never heard of that word before. Yet Scar is acting like it's the letter E in English. But even though his brain knows he's never heard the word, his heart beats harder and feels warmer. What was this Team Bodum? Are you serious? How long have you lived in the Hermit Empire? He shakes his head as if to regain his thoughts. He turns away from Green to close the file with a soft click. For like at least 5 years? He hesitantly remarks. It is hard to really remember when he and Pearl had shown up after he got kicked out of foster care. Pearl had only been 15 at the time, but he had made sure to grab her before anyone went looking. They had taken a one-way ticket to the biggest city they knew of and started being vigilantes to follow in Crow's footsteps. What good did that? Now he has nobody. Then you must live under a rock, G. Come here, look. He huffs a sad laugh under his breath as he leads Green out the way they came and into one of the other doors along the hallway. Scar holds his arm out, pointing to the walls of the revealed connected hallway. Green's eyes widen as he steps to where Scar presents. Along the whole length of the hall are paintings of all past and present heroes. Each had ornate frames that were somehow related to their powers, like the now retired hero TFC, who had empathic powers, along with a few minor telekinesis powers. His frame had swirls and deep blues and purples with seemingly floating flowers around the sides. Continuing his path down, he kept looking back and forth at each painting on either side of the hall. He takes notes of several of the portraits. They look candid, like they had to sit and pose while they were painted, while they didn't just take a picture. Green didn't know. He saw a text picture gilded in flames that somehow didn't burn the paper or smoke up the room. Starvoid's frame was so dark that it looked like it was cropped out of existence. Green decided not to look at it too long. He continues his slow-moving jaunt down the hallway until he gets halfway down the hall where he stopped in his tracks. There, painted directly on the wall from floor to ceiling, was a mural containing 5 figures. Shockingly, 3 of the 5 faces were painted over with black paint, covering their eyes and distinguishing their facial features. They were all lined up and posed in a way that Green could only assume was a mid-shot laugh. He recognized a younger-looking Hawkeye on the furthest right. He held his signature bow in one hand, while his other was covering his mouth as he laughed. A few of the scars Green were used to seeing had disappeared. His outfit was different as well, where now he wears a lot of black with patches of blue and oranges, such as his logo. In this mural, he was dressed in a long, deep green robe. It was loose, wrapped around his waist, showing a deep V down his chest, detailed with gold accents and lace. A slit up to side showed off his knee-high gold and green matching boots. His hair was much longer as well, tied in a braid draped over his shoulder. But even with all of that, the most notable difference to Green was his signature sunglasses were missing, though his eyes were closed mid-laugh. Next to Hawkeye was a person with a womanly figure. She was dressed in a dark blue skin-tight bodysuit that went from her neck to her knees. She had a hooded caplet thrown over her shoulders that seemed frozen mid-movement, yet she didn't seem to have been moving in her pose. She had her hands held up by her head, grasping like a clawing cat, and feet planting firmly on the ground. Her hair was flowing around her shoulders, also floating. The caplet was painted with intricate moon phases, along with her bodysuit, which had stars as well. The shadow cast by her frame seemed darker than the rest of them. On the furthest left was a bulkier male figure dressed in mostly yellow and black. There was a big yellow eye on the front of his shirt, which had a resemblance to the one Hawkeye wore now. The man had a yellow flowing shawl reaching from one shoulder to the other, held together with a brooch, made of some sort of gem. He wore baggy pants cuffed around his ankle, with a utility belt holding what looked to be potions and other gear. He was painted with his head turned to the other, and his arm behind his head, as if nervously scratching his neck. To his side was another male figure, taller than the rest. He was dressed in black slacks, with a white dress shirt tucked in. A red tie sat across his front, possibly a bit too tight. He had a matching suit jacket thrown over his shoulder with one hand, while the other was resting on his popped-out hip. He was also looking at the rest of the group, in which Green hoped was a smile. In the center of them all was a figure that made Green's air catch in his throat, but he couldn't piece together why. This person was shorter, and their figure was covered in a hefty-looking purple and white robes. They looked directly forward, and was the only face other than Hawkeye's whose face wasn't painted over in black. But that didn't need to be, as a white mask covered their whole face. Painted on the slate was the Heroes Association Watcher logo in purple. How the person behind the mask could even see is beyond Green. But the most catching part of the entire mural was the person's pure white wings stretched out over the entire group, blanketing them all in safety. He couldn't look away from the painting. Something in his chest yearned for what was here, and he didn't know why. Something was missing. Something so crucial, but his brain would just stop going forward whenever he thought about it for too long. Something is missing. This is Team Bodum. Green jumped back, not even realizing how close he'd gotten to the painting in the first place. He didn't even hear Scar side up to him. What was he thinking about? The first and only last crime-fighting group the Hero Association ever put together. We were the face of the Hero Association, the Golden Children. He goes to the first figure on the painting himself. You know who this is. He laughs, though it sounds self-deprecating. I was a new hero, freshly trained from the intern program. I was shocked they let me into a project such as Bodum. Such big shoes to fill. Green feels like he's hearing something he shouldn't. Something Hawkeye won't ever admit to, but Scar doesn't seem to have much of a reservation. He continues to the person next to him, not continuing the train of thought about young Hawkeye. This is Moonlight. She was scouted along with the rest of Bodum as vigilantes. She has, he quickly corrects, this really cool shadow manipulation power. Could basically teleport and create anything from thin air. She's so powerful. Green scrunched his nose slightly. He immediately thinks of his sister and her less than stellar shadow manipulation. Maybe in a different world he could have introduced Pearl to Moonlight, and she would have taught Pearl how to use it to such strength. He has many memories of helping Pearl preen her ungrown wings, while she tries just to make each shadow bend slightly. While shadow manipulation is one of the most common powers, it is extremely difficult to master. When they found out Pearl had that power, they rented every book from the library. And last Green had seen her, she was still barely getting a hold of it. Next to her is... He pauses, looking over to Green. This is her best friend, Watcher. He is basically the voice of the group. His wings are so powerful, he could lift all of us off the ground with one wing beat. We still don't know if his power is super strong wings or if it's just an avian thing. Projectiles of any kind would just bounce off. Moonlight and him were attached to the hip. Couldn't see one without the other trailing behind. Green feels a pang of pain zip through his heart. He misses Pearl so much. Shaking his head to rid his mind of such depressing thoughts. He will find her. All of them. He comprehends what Scar had said about the wings. That doesn't sound like any avian that Green has ever heard of. But he has also ever met Crow, Pearl, and his parents. So he doesn't really know many avians. His wings certainly don't do that. He's been on the receiving end of a stray dagger one too many times for that to be proven. Besides, Watcher is, Redstone. Redstone? Like the fancy wire tech? Green interrupts without thinking, tilting his head to the side. While he hears Scar stumble in words, he definitely chooses to ignore it. Scar just huffs a disbelieving laugh. You really have been under a rock. Sure you didn't get hit too hard on the streets? He shakes his head as Green delivers an offended squawk. Yes, like the tech, but he had the name first. Redstone was so good at making machines and useful gadgets on the go that his name became one and the same with Dust, the actual name for Redstone. Don't ask me what that stands for. Redstone has told me 1,000,000 times and I'll never understand. Dominant utility of static transference. Dominant utility of static transference, Green states without even blinking. His mouth moves before his brain, having heard Mumbo talk his ear off about Dust years ago. I thought you said you'd never heard of it before, Scar asks, taking it back at his quick response. I don't. You just remind me of a friend who does. He turns his head away, looking at the floor. He never thought he would actually miss Mumbo's Dust rants. When the shape-shifting vigilante had started to pick up books on the stuff, Green remembers how often he had to drag him away from his 3 a.m. projects to actually sleep. He was actually pretty adept at it before he disappeared. Green knows that the amount of osmosis information he must have picked up just from Mumbo's mumbling rants must be wild. Renting must be a common trait of those Dust fellas. If the way Scar talks about this Redstone guy is anything to go by. Every Redstone master you've ever heard of, Redstone paved the way for them. He's the original master. Scar continues to stare wistfully at the mural before singing and looking at the last hero. This is Mighty. He hates his name. Scar suddenly laughs. We just call him Mighty. You can assume he wasn't the one to pick out his name. He isn't too bad at Redstone either, but his power is super strength, and in direct opposition to Moonlight, he has some minor light manipulation in there too. He likes that power way more than being strong. Green remembers the way Impulse used to spend hours training his powers. Much like shadow manipulation, light manipulation is also very common and hard to master. Impulse would sit in the sun, reaching for the rays to try and bend it. It makes sense that this Mighty couldn't master it if they had such a useful power as super strength. Those four, Scar continues, had been a group for around 3 years before I was added. I was the last to join the group. Didn't get to spend much time with them before. He reached up and touched the wings of the center hero. Before? Green asked softly, also raising his hand to trace the outside of the hero's wings. He's seen many wing shapes for avians over the years. While they were increasingly rare hybrid, he had read a lot of books that showed off every known patterning. After all, each avian has some bird descendant where they got their wings from. This hero has the shape of a crow, but is pure white. A white crow. How interesting. Before Scar let his hand drop with a sigh, he looked like he was debating something in his mind. He turned his head and scanned Green up and down. But when he reached Green's eyes, he apparently didn't find what he was looking for. His face hardened and he took a step away from the wall. They disappeared one day 3 years ago. Nobody knows what happened. I was in my room and they all got called for a meeting. Not unusual for the four of them to get called and not me. I had been with them for barely 2 years, so I guess I was still new, I guess. But they just didn't come back. Call it a hunch, but Green doesn't feel like he's getting the full story. Scar seems to be relaying the story to him as if it was written on cue cards in front of him, stilted and rehearsed, as if he doesn't believe the story he is telling. You don't believe that, do you? He hesitantly asked, dropping his hand to his side. He steps away from the mural so he can see the full picture. A beautiful painted depiction of friends and heroes disgraced by someone painting over their faces. Harsh black lines hastily painted over their features, obscuring anything that could remotely identify them. I don't know what to believe. It's what we've all been told, Scar says, clipped. He stalks next to Green, pausing to stand next to him, gazing at the mural as well. They stand in silence before Green finally speaks up. Well, just because that's what you've been told doesn't mean that's what actually happened, Green replies nonchalantly, shrugging his shoulders as he puts his hands in his pockets. Scar slowly turns his head to stare down at Green with a confused look. Green feels like a puzzle being solved under his gaze, but remains still. Scar turns his head slightly to look up at the ceiling, as if something nice. As looking for something. You shouldn't give me false hope. Not very nice, he speaks quietly. It's not false if I believe it. Green stops short, breathing in deeply. I know some things about searching for missing family members. It's never false hope if someone believes in it. Scar stops abruptly, his eyes scanning around the walls more intensely. He's looking in the corners and around Green as if paranoid someone is watching or listening. He leans in close to Green. Close enough, Green feels his breath on his neck, and he stays still. I've been looking for 3 years, Green. False hope is all I have left, he says shakily. A lot of things are clicking into place in Green's mind as he hears Scar speak. Why it seems Scar knows the organization of the archive a little too well. The way Scar knows so much about aliens and their needs, the mask of bravado he puts in front of people, maybe it's pity, or maybe understanding, possibly a mix of both, but Green finds himself speaking before thinking. I'll help you. I'll help you find them, he hears himself say to Scar. Equally as quiet. It causes Scar to suck in a sharp breath, hold it, frozen in place. Help me find my family, and I'll help you find yours. Green reaches a hand up and places it on Scar's shoulder, pushing him away to look into his face. He looks almost devastated, a single tear falling and curling around his lips. Yeah, around his jaw. Nobody believes me, he breathes heavily. I have nobody to believe me. Let's believe in each other. Okay, I want to trust you, but I can't tell you the full story yet. I can't. That's okay. We can work on it. It's getting late, and I've had enough emotionally devastating conversations for the night. Why don't we regroup tomorrow? Search these archives a bit more. 2 sets of eyes is better than 1. Green smiles up at Scar, who seems to deflate a bit, shoulders drooping with a long sigh. Yeah, that's probably for the best. Let's get out of here. Scar takes a small step out of screen space, shaking his hands out at his sides. He's still hunched over slightly. A few strands of his typically slicked back hair are falling in front of his face. He takes a few calming breaths before wiping the tear away. Green feels something in his chest, a warm feeling traveling from his lungs to his heart, then his throat. He feels his wings twitch behind himself, flexing slowly. While focusing on getting his damn wings still, Green doesn't realize he's lifted his hand, brushing Scar's hair behind his ear with a calming coo. Scar froze as Green realized what he had done, clearing his throat, Cutting off any more bird noises, he takes a full step away from Scar. He feels the tips of his ears burn, and his wings give one more violent attempt at reaching out from behind him before he finally regains his mind. Suddenly he hears a soft laugh. Looking up with a small scowl, he sees Scar hiding his smile behind his hand, shaking his head. You don't have to hide your avian tendencies, Green. Trust me, I'm used to it. If not a few years removed. He turns on his heel, back facing Green. He watches as he lifts his glasses into his hair, rubbing his eyes with his palms, before replacing the glasses back on his nose. Waiting for Green to start walking with him, the two leave the way they came and get into the elevator. Like last time, Scar is the one to use the thumbprint scanner, waiting for the doors to close and lift them back into the trading room halls. Green thinks of what Scar had said about not having to hide himself. While realistically, he knows that the world is a very different place than the one he grew up in, he was still worried about being in the way. It had to be annoying to deal with weird birdie traits, but Scar was friends with that Watcher hero, and if they were an avian, then maybe at least Scar wouldn't care too much. It would still be hard to transition to suppressing all of his instincts to suddenly letting them go. But if he just lets a few squawks and chirps out on purpose, then he goes back to feeling fine. Yeah, that seemed good, probably. Coming back out of his mind, he must have been quiet for too long. Scar decides to break the silence Green didn't even realize must have been awkward. So, you were trying to break into restricted areas on purpose? He cheekily asked. Of course. The Archive has crime all over it in Hermit Empire, and you expect me not to use it for my own personal gain? The Hero Association needs better security. He laughs across his arms. I think they need to hire less newbie birds. Scar quips back. Hey, I'll have you know, just let me walk in there. You just let me walk in there. You are just as much as an accomplice. Damn right. I am the best accomplice. He stutters through the word slightly, making Green smile. This hot guy might actually turn out to be an okay accomplice. Or maybe you should say Scar is the accomplice. He's yet to see Hot Guy be anything more than an ass. But who knows? Maybe this alliance will be good for both of them. Alright, that is the end of Chapter 7.